G'day, Dino here from 4x4 Australia and welcome to our off-road driving series. Today we're going to be talking about, you guessed it, mud. Now, a lot of people you'll see are driving around with muddy four-wheel drives. They wear it like a badge of honour. You know, fair enough, it is fun to play in mud, but I've got to tell you, if you can avoid it, you should really avoid it, because mud can be really bad for your four-wheel drive. So if you can't avoid driving through mud, you're going to want to make sure your car's equipped to do it. So there are certain things that you're going to need on your vehicle if it's really slippery mud. The first of which is off-road tyres, and specifically mud terrain tyres. They're going to give you a wide open tread block that's going to give you a lot more traction in the slippery stuff. But if you have all-terrains or even highway terrain tyres, you'll still be able to do mud if you lower your pressures. Lowering your tyre pressures will lengthen the footprint and give the tyre a lot more flexibility and allow it to get more purchase in the slippery stuff and hopefully get you through the muddy sections. Another thing you're going to want to have is good ground clearance. If you're in mud like this, you'll need to check the depth first, and we'll do that in a minute. The more ground clearance you have, the deeper the mud you'll be able to get through. And remember, those two mud tracks are going to have a high crown in the middle, so if you don't have the ground clearance, that's where you're going to get hooked up and you'll get stuck in the mud. So if it's a really deep track that you can see either side and you don't think you'll have the ground clearance, you might have to straddle that crown on the side, but then you'll have to try and avoid sliding into the mud. All these techniques require a certain way of driving. So some other stuff you might want to have on your vehicle if you're driving through mud is a snorkel if it's particularly deep, just like any water crossing, and also breathers for your differentials, your gearbox and your transfer case that'll feed up into the engine bay nice and high. Before you dive into icy cold muddy water, and it's cold today I can tell you that, your vehicle components are going to be quite hot. So if you have a hot gearbox or a hot transfer case or hot diffs going straight into icy cold water, those components can suddenly contract, and where the seals are around those components, water can get in, and in this case muddy, dirty water. And the last thing you want in any of those components is dirty, muddy water. It will cause all sorts of damage. So pull up before you go through the mud puddle, check the depth, give your car some time to cool down, and then take it easy and drive on through. So you'll find that some vehicles don't even have diff breather extensions. They just have a little cap and a little valve in there to let pressure in and out as the diff. Before you drive through anything like this, you cannot see what's going on, so you need to check the depth. So you're not only looking for the depth of the mud though, you're also trying to feel what the surface is like. You know, is it really sloppy mud underneath, or is there a hard surface down there? And you also want to have a feel around for obstructions, you know, whether that's a log or something in there, or something that someone's dumped in the mud. You look at this water and you cannot see beneath it. So then even after you've driven through the mud, there's some certain things you're going to need to do to look after your vehicle. The paintwork, I mean, that's the obvious one. If you brush up against a muddy car, you're going to scratch the hell out of the paintwork. It's just no good for it. You need to clean your car after you've driven through the mud. You also need to clean underneath it. All of those components under there that have got muddy, the hot exhaust that's going to be caked in mud, mud that gets between the chassis rails and the body, all sorts of stuff. You need to get that mud out or you're going to have problems down the track. And it's not just the outside of the car you've got to think about too, it's the inside. You know, you've been out in the mud and you brush up against the hard plastics inside your car, you're going to scratch those too. Your carpets, they can be destroyed by mud. So you're going to want to have rubber mats in there on the floor. Make sure it's clean. It's your investment, you got to look after it. If you've been driving long muddy sections for days on end, say you're doing a desert trip or something like that, at the end of each day you're going to need to check your radiator. If your radiator's full of mud, it's going to overheat the engine. You know, make sure there's no mud in your alternator. That can destroy an alternator bushings real quick. So another thing that we need to talk about is traction aids. If you're driving in the slippery stuff, you're going to want all the traction you can get. So if you have a rear diff lock, lock it. If you have a front diff lock, lock it. But bear in mind, if you lock that front diff, it's going to affect your steering. The other thing to think about is what happens if you get stuck. If there's another vehicle traveling with you or you're in a convoy, have a snatch strap ready or a recovery rope ready or something like that. If you're by yourself, you're going to want to have a winch. Have a look around for trees and stuff to use as anchor points. Make sure you're prepared in case things don't go as planned. Anyway, it's raining and filling up this puddle with mud. So I told you not to play in it, but hey, we're out here working, so we're going to give you a demo. Let's do it. And don't forget, keep an eye out for our next How To Off-Road Driving series.